Hello there, and welcome to today's webcast, Leading During a Crisis, exploring the best practices and leadership tactics to respond to a crisis situation, which is certainly what all of us have found ourselves in today. I'm Terry Takai, and I am the co-director for the Center for Digital Government, and I'm excited to serve as the host for today's session. Thanks for joining us. We're going to have a great session over the next 30 minutes. And today joining me, and I'm so excited about the group that's with me today. First is Marguerite Byrne, who's the CIO, the Chief Information Officer for Westchester County Department of Information Technology. So Marguerite, welcome. And secondly, Stephanie Dedman, who's the Chief Information Officer for Tennessee in the Department of Finance and Administration. So Marguerite, Stephanie, thank you for taking time out of your very, very busy schedules to be with us today. So before we get started, we have a few housekeeping notes for you on the screen. Please take a look and see some of the items there that sort of govern the way that we're running the webinar. Also during today's webcast, you'll be able to connect with your peers via LinkedIn and Twitter. For those of you on Twitter, please use hashtag GovTechLive or hashtag GovLive to share key takeaways, quotes, and learnings from today's webcast. So just kicking off, would like to give you some background on our crisis response initiative. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll be having the fourth of many new virtual conversations that are part of our joint program, the Crisis Response Initiative from Government Technology and Governing. This initiative, which lives on govtech.com/crisisresponse and governing.com/crisisresponse, aggregates data, news, virtual conversations like today's, and industry resources to equip government leaders with tactics to respond to crisis and the next normal ahead. So let's move to our topic for today. The COVID-19 pandemic was yet another reminder that state and local leaders must be ready to cope with large-scale disruption. Effective leadership at the city, county, and state level has been vital for limiting the spread of the virus and maintaining support for social distancing efforts. And strong leadership will be just as important as communities navigate the economic recovery and cope with declining revenues. In our discussion today, we'll cover leadership lessons from the immediate virus response, perspectives on communities through the next phase, and then leading and managing staff during the economic downturn. So Stephanie, let me turn first to you. So tell us, there's been a lot of discussion about the health crisis, and certainly since then we've had the challenges of social unrest, and now we're looking at an upcoming election, which is just raising the discussion on the political spectrum even higher. So tell us, though, about how it actually worked within state government. What actions did you take in the first few days, and who were your partners, and also who took key leadership roles in state government to really give and communicate to citizens and businesses not only what was happening, but what was going to happen next?
Right. Thank you, Terry. Those are all good questions. And I'll sort of answer that from two perspectives. One is at our statewide level, what did we do early on? And then from an IT perspective, also what did we do? In our state, we have a chief operating officer role that reports to the governor. He really took the lead in pulling together some key folks to really address early on what do we need to do to have more people work from home. As the weeks unfolded, what challenges were agencies having? I will say that the state of Tennessee, we actually did have a formal work from home policy or approach before the pandemic. It's actually been in place about 7 or 8 years. And to our benefit, about 30% of our state workforce was already working from home some amount of time. Admittedly, not very many were working 5 days a week from home. But the initial focus really was to get more people, to increase that 30% level, to get as many people productive and working from home as we could. And from an HR perspective, to understand, for those who couldn't work from home, what roles were they in, and just to make sure we were being as fair and judicious about protecting both our workforce and our citizens at the same time. From an IT perspective, it was about getting additional laptops, and then all of the technology that goes along with that, VPN connections, Jabber, WebEx. Those are all products that we use, software that we use to enable our workforce to work from home. So we had a number of vendor partners that really stepped up to help us get laptops in a short amount of time. And then it was the rollout and training, and then support, just recognizing that as we increased our usage of these technologies, making sure we had the support structure in place to handle an increased number of calls. So additionally, our chief operating officer, as the weeks unfolded and unemployment, became a real thing that was growing, and then also as the federal government issued, the additional benefits, working with our Department of Labor and our Department of Human Services, because the call volume and the processing volumes were astronomical, just a few weeks in. And so working with vendors such as Accenture to help us implement more chatbot functionality, and to really stand up additional call centers in very short order. We had a number of our vendors reach out and offer assistance, and that was positively overwhelming and appreciated. And we of course couldn't call on all of those, but many we did.
Fantastic. Well, Stephanie, I know that Tennessee was very much, a leader as it related to some of the work that you've been doing around employee involvement. In fact, just the overall approach that you've taken to recruitment and retention. So I think that really paid, great benefit in terms of moving to the remote work situation. But as a part of that, even though you're prepared for that, you're not necessarily prepared at the scale and the scope, I'm sure, that you were faced with. And so what were some of the leadership challenges that you had in those early days, just trying to make sure that your team was together and that they knew what was expected of them?
Yes. I'm a firm believer that your workforce, they take their cue from leadership. And so I think early on, my leadership team, we were trying to focus on remaining calm and being flexible, but also recognizing we needed additional communication. We needed to reach out and let people know what we knew, what was coming, and admit what we didn't know. I think after the initial 3 or 4 weeks, employees began to feel like, well, surely they're going to make us go back to work, and we're not ready, and we're worried and scared. And so it was encouraging folks to, reach out to their supervisors and managers, and vice versa. And then, communicating that as we could, that from the governor, that direction was going to be to continue to work from home for the foreseeable future. And then as weeks has turned into months, just looking for to me, the leadership challenges have been making sure we stay in touch with our workforce in different ways, whether that's town halls. We are looking at starting an initiative to have my leadership team reach out to all of our employees, and at this, I'm referring to our IT team. We're fairly centralized here, and so it is a big team. We have about 1,300 IT employees that support all of the executive branch agencies, and so we're going to just have the leadership team randomly reach out, make 2 or 3 phone calls a day to our employees that we don't necessarily know or work with every day, just to say, how are you doing? Do you have what you need? What are your concerns? I think other leadership challenges have been just recognizing that this is a different time. Most of us, or almost all of us, have not been through something like this, and we need to be more flexible in our workplace practices. We have relaxed some of our work from home requirements, that if you have children at home or you're caring for parents, that you can still do that during the workday and not have alternative arrangements. So I think from a leadership challenge, it is being flexible, being willing to change, and just making sure you are relentless in communicating and being creative in how you do that communication so that it stays fresh, interesting, and relevant to what our employees need to hear.
Stephanie, I love the discussion around flexibility, because I think you're right. Things are changing on an ongoing basis. And so what we thought yesterday might be what we would be able to do tomorrow isn't necessarily happening. And I loved your example, thinking about just this question of childcare, particularly as we move into the fall, and as the question of, children going back to school or not is still, an open question. Just a question, I guess, in terms of working together. I know that, all of you are very active in the National Association of State CIOs, and that, very often the state CIOs communicate. But, how did you guys actually stay connected, and how did that help you in terms of understanding how others were hoping to meet challenges?
Well, you're right about NASCIO, and really Doug Robinson and his team took a leadership role in pulling us together. We get together every other week. NASCIO hosts a call with the state CIOs, and really the agenda has been rich in sharing lessons learned, understanding challenges, and how each of the state CIOs have approached those challenges. And so that having that forum for both the CIOs and the Chief Information Security Officers to just share information has been very helpful. And then also sharing kind of highlights of new technologies, new initiatives that we have undertaken out of need during this time. Usually on the agenda, at times we'll spotlight or highlight, key initiatives that could benefit multiple states. So, as usual, NASCIO has been a great resource and, been there for us during this challenging time to help us stay connected and share information that's helpful.
Thanks. Thank you, Stephanie. Well, Marguerite, let's move to thinking about, we are where we are right now, and certainly Westchester County has been right in the heart of, some of the challenges that are happening now. But I'm sure that you're starting to think about what's going to happen next. And so, perhaps you could talk about, how are you looking at kind of moving to that next phase? I know, as you and I were chatting before, you've been in the office working this and making sure that things are happening. But clearly, as you're thinking about going forward, are your employees, are they comfortable with returning to work? And what are some of the concerns they're having? And how is that challenging you as a leader in terms of how you make them comfortable, and yet knowing that you need to keep county government moving?
Well, it's a perfect timing. We opened earlier this month in June. We opened at 50% staffing. We've also have had a telework policy for many years. But when we reopened, we decided we're going to go 50% in-house, 50% work at home. So we have about 130 employees in several locations. We looked at floor plans to make sure we had enough social distancing for individuals. We try to be, and I think the key word for today's event is flexible. We try to be flexible with individuals, but coming back, people had mixed reactions. Some people would say, I always wanted to work from home. Now that I'm working from home, I can't wait to get back into the office. There were some of those. Many, though, I will say, were leery about coming back, and their concerns were based on protocols and safety. But we're back at 50%. We have our weekly team meetings. But some of the concerns were, childcare, absolutely, pre-existing conditions. And, we've told some people who have said, I have a health condition, fine, you continue to work from home. They're worried about who's in the office. Is the public in? Are there the general public coming into our building? What is the protocol on the elevators, which are now 2 individuals in an elevator? What are the cleaning protocols? How often is DPW going to come by and clean the offices? What is the mask protocol? What are we doing for social distancing? How often are the bathrooms being cleaned? Is a cleaning person going to come into my office and clean my desk? I prefer them not to. So we have some people don't mind the cleaning crew to come in. Some don't want anyone in their offices. So it's trying to help the individual be comfortable with coming back. So, for example, childcare, we don't have camps open here in New York unless your child is special ed, and that's allowed in person. So one person who I considered pretty essential wanted to stay home because they couldn't have childcare, but we have camps for the essential workers. So we try to see if we can get that person into the essential worker camp. So you have to be really flexible and creative. But, some of the things that, we also talked about is, listening to understand. Someone may be telling you they can't come to work. And as you dig deeper, you find out, what the real concern is. Some of it's just general anxiety. And for that, we talk with the team leaders every week, is to promote EAP, because your mental health is also important during this whole process. It's not just your physical, it's your mental health. People are tired of being home. People don't want to be home with their children. People are afraid to go to the grocery store. All that impacts you and your ability to work and be productive. And if you don't take care of that, there's no, you can't work productively. So that's what we've been doing. Like I said, it's even today, we had our team leader meeting and people were concerned. So-and-so didn't wear their mask properly. Okay, so did you tell them to? There's only so much we can do, but people need to also advocate. If they're concerned about the safety protocol, they need to also advocate for themselves.
Thank you for that input, because it's sort of real life input from those of you that are actually returning to work. So as you think about it, Marguerite, are you, as you're thinking about the future, are you thinking about any potential organization kinds of changes based on the feedback that you're getting, not only about remote work, but also in terms of, what you're seeing as your next steps, given the budget challenges that are out there?
Well, that's actually a great question, because as a result of the declining, tax revenue here in our county due to, the closures, our county exec earlier this month issued a voluntary separation incentive. Employees had to have their paperwork in by this past Friday, and this Friday we'll be losing about 220 individuals have taken the package to leave the county, 5 within IT. But IT has had 10 retirements this year, and we have 130 positions. So we're losing a significant amount. So what does that mean? We talked about what's next year going to look at. We're currently in the process of doing our 2021 operating budget. It means we're going to do a lot less projects. We're going to be doing enterprise-based projects, and departmental projects or upgrades, where possible, will be delayed for a year or so. We need to focus on where we're going to get the best bang for our buck. And as I said to our team this morning, we're still going to do quality work because that's what we're known for here. We're still going to do quality work. We're just going to have to do less projects. Some people are concerned that their project isn't going to get done, and it's just a reality. We don't have the people, we don't have the money, and other departments are also being cut. So we have to be creative on which projects we take that are going to get the most bang for, the people we work for, which is the taxpayer at the end of the day. That's what we work for, the taxpayer, and we have to make sure they're getting the most value with the resources we have.
Well, I totally understand, Marguerite. I mean, that's one of the big challenges out there. So as you're actually looking at what things you're going to do on an enterprise level, and you're looking at departmental projects, how are you keeping your relationships up with your customers when there's less face-to-face time, there's less ability to actually talk to people, and in some cases, I'm sure it's actually negotiation around what projects are going to be done when. So how is that working in today's environment?
Well, we have a good relationship. We have a commissioners meeting, and then as the CIO, I meet with my fellow commissioners one-on-one, depending upon the department, either once a month or every other month. So we have that relationship. So I can pick up the phone and say, that jail upgrade we were going to do, right now, I don't have the resources. Now, if you want to advocate for me to get more staff, we can help you out. But in the interim, we're going to have to postpone it. And let's talk about what the impact of postponing it is going to mean for your department. So it's a conversation that we have with the departments. Most of them, I'd say just about every one of them understands, because they're in the same boat as I am. They also know, and I've also stated that when departments lose staff, as we're doing right now, they're going to rely more and more on IT to bring those efficiencies. So they've advocated, some of them have offered money for us, if need be, to hire consultants. So we try to be creative, but it's more having the conversations with your colleagues, expressing, my concerns, what I think the impact will be to them, and hopefully getting them to buy into my plan. If not, we, try to work something out. Everyone's been great, I will say. We all get it. IT, I will say, and I'm sure many of the people on this phone know, this pandemic, I guess one of the few good things is the recognition of the talent and the resources IT brings to an organization. I think this was our time to shine when it comes to that area.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, Marguerite, because, clearly what we wanted to be sure of, if we could, is that recognition continued, that it wasn't okay, I got all the help to get me to remote work, but not thinking about, the longer term impact from a technology perspective in the support of government business. So I'm really encouraged to hear you say that. And, also encouraged to hear your plans around staying connected with your customers, because we all know we're not out there, for technology's sake. And it's really that joint prioritization process that's so important. So I'd like to move on to a panel discussion and just hear from really both Marguerite and Stephanie. One of the things that we've seen as states and local governments have been facing these budget crises is that it is starting to impact employees. And I think, Marguerite, you talked about certainly the potential for retirement. But I think that some states are worried about actual cuts. There are other areas that are concerned about potential furloughs. In fact, some locations have actually faced furloughs. How's employee morale? And, Stephanie, you talked about reaching out, but just, how are employees feeling? And, are some of the, your ability to actually reach out and talk to people, does that seem to be helping in terms of that employee morale? Because, you need the employees that you have in terms of being able to face what's coming ahead. So Stephanie, let me start with you. Stephanie, I think you're on mute.
So sorry. Thank you. It has to happen once a week, right? You're right. I mean, morale is delicate, and it's impacted. Employees are worried, and depending on their work from home situation, whether they like it or they don't, or they, there's just all kinds of factors coming into play here. I think the things we're trying to do is certainly be appreciative of all the work and recognize that. One thing we've started trying to do, at least on a monthly basis, is share the breadth of the work that we are doing in IT. So we have this one pager, actually it's probably more than one page at this point, that just shares, all of the things that we've accomplished. Because it's one thing to say we've stood up or we've implemented 1,000 new JVPN accounts. There's a whole host of work that goes on behind the scenes to make that happen. And so it's just trying to recognize in its entirety what IT is delivering during this time. Now, a lot of what we're doing, I definitely question myself. Why did it take a pandemic for us to, to consider some of these things? We've also done, my leadership team, we individually recorded videos saying thank you and trying to, each of us kind of recognize a key particular project or work that was accomplished. And we, kind of put all that together and sent it out to the entire workforce just to recognize some of the hard work that's going on. So I think our morale is good. I think it is, as I started with, it is delicate and fragile, and we have to continually think about how to stay in touch. And as Marguerite mentioned, encourage, make sure people know that the EAP is there. And regardless of what kind of stress or frustration or difficulty someone is having, to make use of that if necessary.
Thanks. Marguerite, how about in Westchester County? What are some of the things that your employees are talking about as it relates to how they're dealing? You mentioned some items about stress, but how's the morale overall?
Morale is actually, my understanding, it's pretty good. I meet with my team leaders once a week. They have to meet with their staff at least once a week. I've been coming in. Everyone knows how to reach me. Everybody has their WebEx accounts if they want to see me. Encouragement. We acknowledge, as does Stephanie, some great projects that are going on, especially during this time. We were called to make a backup emergency operations center right in the middle of the pandemic, when the primary emergency operations center was fully staffed, fully operational. But in case someone was infected, we wanted to have a fallback place. But we're trying to be positive, encouraging people, being flexible. And then I have the saying that they all laugh at me, that it's not the end. It all works out in the end. And if it hasn't worked out, it's not the end. So things can still churn around. So I always try to be positive that way. And they laugh at me, but they've used it right back at me when I think things are going bad. Like, it's not the end. Things will change. Things will get better. And and that's the philosophy. I try to encourage them to be positive. And you know what? There are days, myself and I'm sure everyone else, you don't want to be here, or you're just overwhelmed. I mean, there are days where I am just overwhelmed, and I just said, everyone needs to leave me alone for 20 minutes while I sit and set my priorities, because especially now, we have people coming back. IT has been charged with scheduling software for people coming back in the office. Stay in your car until it's okay, until we send you a text. Temperature controls. We wrote an application for staff to do every morning a health attestation to basically let us know that you're healthy to come into work. So we have some kind of documentation that you've taken your temperature and you haven't been exposed to COVID, so we can do for contact tracing. And all this was coming back as we were reopening, and it was just overwhelming. So it's just being able to say to people, look, when you're overwhelmed or you've had it, so say, you know what, I need a break. You know, I am just right now, I'm not someone pleasant to speak to. So, you know, and I think we all, my whole staff knows that I'm okay with that. If you say, look, right now, Marguerite, I don't want to hear from you because I'm overwhelmed. And so I think morale is pretty good because we're open and honest and very direct with one another. And it's good and bad, but we're a big family overall. I can't say, you know, just like families, there are times you get along and times you don't. We're a big family. How's that?
Oh, that's great. You know, I love it when there's this, when the leaders are human and are willing to admit that we all have bad days.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to be respectful of our time commitment, so we'll have to wrap it up here. In closing, I would just like to thank Stephanie and Marguerite. Fantastic, and thank you for sharing your insights on our webcast. I would also like to thank our anchor sponsors, Cisco, IBM, and VMware, in addition to our sponsors, Alteryx, Conduit, DocuSign, Elastic, Red Hat, and Tenable, for making it possible to have this important discussion today. And thanks to our audience for spending time with us. If you'd like to download your certificate of attendance, you can do so now by clicking on the certification icon at the bottom of the screen. We look forward to seeing you again soon at another government technology and governing event. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.